Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Tommy Joyner Radio Show. I'm here with my good homie, Taylor Gavinchuk, coming at me from Vancouver. Today, I am over here in Barcelona, and I'm very excited to catch up with this man for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is this cool Medellin hat that he's wearing.
Yeah. Streetwear.
Yeah, dude. What's up, man? How are you doing?
Good. It's like early morning on my end, so I'm just having my second cup of coffee here, just getting ready for the day. But yeah, things are good. It's pouring rain outside, which is great. I'm watching everybody walk to work in their umbrellas, and I'm inside, so I mean, can't complain.
Is that a pretty standard like thing to happen in the fall over there in Vancouver?
Oh, it's gonna rain until April. Yeah, like it's gonna rain continuously, basically until April. So, I know someone who just moved here from Sydney, Australia. You know, she got here. There's like a week of sun in August, and she was really psyched. And now it's raining, and I'm like, yeah, you better get used to this because it's gonna happen nonstop.
That's awesome,
Yeah.
man. Well,
Yeah.
I guess to each their own. Some people seem to do well with that. I think seasons are cool in general. I'm in Barcelona right now, experiencing fall for the first time in a while, and it's nice. I mean, it doesn't get that cold here to begin with, but
Yeah.
it's nice to see the temperature significantly drop and kind of get some crisp mornings and afternoons in.
Yeah. Well, I want to move to Russia like at some point, so I got to get used to seasons. We don't really have seasons here.
Russia.
We have like two seasons. We have like rain and cold, and then like warm sun.
Why would you move to Russia?
Well, my family's from Ukraine originally, so I mean, I want to do the whole area, but I don't know. Russia seems like the biggest, like most kind of stuff to see. But yeah, I'm just obsessed with like Russian history. Everything to do with like Russia between 1800s and pretty much now. I dive pretty deep into that. That's like
cool.
That's my escape. Like I don't do Game of Thrones or any of that stuff. That's like I go Russian war. I don't know why. It's just
Wow.
It's like a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a much more of like an intellectual pursuit than Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I guess so. It's like the real life Game of Thrones.
It's a bit more brain power required to like digest that information.
Yeah, totally.
I actually just watched Game of Thrones like all the way through. I had never seen it. And then
yeah, I've heard it's good.
Yeah, dude, it's amazing. Actually, I really enjoyed it. I feel like series that are that long though. Like I think it's good that they ended it when they did. I don't know if have you ever watched like a series all the way through?
Breaking Bad, The Wire, and Sopranos. Other than that, like not really. Seinfeld.
Yeah,
but
those are probably good examples of ones that didn't get too weird. Like I feel like ones that are related to sci-fi or fantasy, like there's only like so much of a plot that they can keep going with, and then like things happen that just like don't make sense, or you're like, okay, cool, they were like trying too hard to fit that in. Like I don't know if you ever heard of Lost, but
heard of it. Yeah, never watched it though.
yeah, that series got super weird. Season 1 was like my favorite, and then I watched like all of the seasons all the way through, but it got super weird for no apparent reason, just other than to like continue with it, which was kind of annoying.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm more like I listen to radio a lot and like podcast, not radio like in your car, but like old clips of radio and podcasts. Like I find that's more. I listen to that more than like watching shows. I don't know why, just more drawn into that. It's like same as audiobooks. I just listen to audiobooks all day. More like an audio guy.
Yeah, me too, man. The long form like audio podcasts or audiobooks. Do you ever mess with that app called Blinkist that like does audiobook summaries?
No, but I should do that because I read all these books like on Audible and then I forget like a lot of it. So it's like I need like a summary, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's like what book was that from? And then like, oh shoot, like I don't remember. It kind of all overlaps a lot of the time too.
Yeah, I think it's good for, I used to do it like to consume books for the first time, like nonfiction books, because I think a lot of times nonfiction books are written around like there's like one premise, there's like one big piece of information or a point that they're trying to drive home. And to read the entire book sometimes is like a little cumbersome. But it's good for books like that. But I've actually gone back to Audible because like for some reason I don't know. I like to enjoy like I like to consume the longer version of the format, and then I'll go back to Blinkist for summaries if I want to dive into that. Speaking of, I mean, we have a lot in common in terms of like some of the stuff that we digest. Like, have you read any like good books or listened to any like podcast episodes that have like really stood out to you lately as it relates to, I guess in particular as it relates to like spiritual or personal development? Because like you've got some good takes on that.
The book I'm reading right now is amazing, actually. The Body Keeps the Score.
Hmm.
Have you read that? By
No.
Bessel van der, it's a Dutch name, Bessel van der Kolk. It's a very scientific look at how like trauma and stress affects the body and the brain, and like how to basically heal yourself. A lot of it's physically, from like stuff that happened in your childhood. It talks about like the limbic system and the endocrine system, a lot of stuff that like Wim Hof talks about. So that was really interesting because like I've been following Wim Hof for a while.
Yeah.
So hearing, and I love Wim, but like he just kind of yells out like we're going into the chemistry, we're going into the endocrine, and it's like, okay, that's awesome, but like I don't really get it, I guess. And this book, I felt like really dove into that like deeply. And so now I've just been like upping my Wim Hof breathing like the last few weeks. But yeah, no, I've read a few books like on the topic, and a lot of them were really fluffy. They just like, you just find yourself, and just like I dig Wayne Dyer in a way, but then also it's like really simplistic.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, you just have to have no resentments and no expectations of others, and you'll be fine. It's like okay, but like I just feel like life is more complicated than that. And so this book has been a really interesting, like deep dive. It's a 16-hour long audio book, like deep dive into scientific studies, his own practices as a therapist, like what works, what doesn't work, why certain medications work for certain people, what's the difference between PTSD in soldiers versus people who were abused in childhood. Like really interesting stuff,
The
like
body,
very interesting stuff.
the body keeps
Pardon?
the score. The body keeps the
The
score.
body. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
I'll link to that in the show notes. That's pretty dope. Have you ever read any Joe Dispenza's work?
Joe, I feel like somebody just sent me a thing for him. Like somebody just sent me, somebody DM me a link to his actually like yesterday, because I try to post like books that I'm reading on Instagram, like in the stories or whatever. And then I always get recommendations from other people. They're like, oh, like if you're reading that, you got to check out this. So he's on my list now of like, cause this is the topic I'm like obsessed with now, is like trauma.
Yeah.
Um, I had never even considered trauma before, like only 6 months ago that I really start to realize like, whoa, this could be a thing to dive into. Um, because somebody said to me, like, or not to me, but in a video, like, if you don't deal with the underlying trauma and you're just doing self-help, it's like you're driving a car with a foot on the brake and the foot on the gas. And like, I really resonated with that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've just been like diving pretty deep into this stuff, which is good.
What does that mean exactly if you don't deal with the trauma? Like if you don't physically try to like, because a lot of like this new age stuff and a lot of stuff associated with like plant medicines and these different retreats that people are going on lately, I think within the
Yeah.
last like 5 to 10 years and now is dealing with like suppressed emotions that are stored in the
Mm.
body. And like a lot of these theories and things have been around for a while, but it seems like that's picking up steam. Is that kind of like what you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. And like one thing that really trips me out is like the subconscious has no version of time. So something that happened to you when you're like 5 can affect you in major ways when you're like 40.
Yeah.
So, and that's like the subconscious is like such a massive part of the brain. So when I discovered that, that also really kind of tripped me out and was like, whoa, I need to dive into this more too, because I had a really, really, really weird childhood, like really weird. And I'm still being run by that, I'm still in that old house. I'm still in that old house like a lot of the time in my head. And so just getting out of that, I think, has huge benefits for like, business and like entrepreneurship, travel, freedom, spirituality. Like I think all those things benefit from healing that other stuff from earlier.
Hmm. Yeah, man, for sure. I think one of the things I realized is as well, like I just went to this ayahuasca retreat like a month and a half ago in Ecuador, and the
Nice.
people that were on that retreat with me, it was a men's retreat, and a lot of the guys there, like everyone had like a pretty significant story, like
Hmm.
some like very traumatic things, and we're all very like open and vulnerable, so we shared a lot. And I won't get into any details of like things that they experienced, but uh, everyone had like a more dramatic story than I had growing up, especially when they were talking about things that had impacted them as a child.
Hmm.
But as I was there longer, I started uncovering things that had impacted me a lot as well, that weren't necessarily as like maybe treacherous or dark or traumatic sounding on the surface, but still made me like caused me to feel these emotions or these things that had been like reoccurring in my subconscious for a number of years that were still manifesting themselves in weird ways like in my life. So it was the first time that I ever was just like, okay, cool, like um we've there's a good chance that we've all felt the exact same spectrum of emotions. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah, yeah.
the worst thing that you've ever experienced, like maybe like on the surface objectively someone else hasn't experienced anything as bad as that, but there's a good chance that they've still felt as bad as you did with regard to something else.
Right. And it's not, it's all like relative too. It's like somebody else's experience doesn't like necessarily mirror yours. So like
Right.
something that happens in Africa doesn't like lessen the pain of like someone that, you know, dying. So it's like,
Right.
yeah, it's like we all, I think, feel the same emotions. It's just like the stories, the names and the dates and like the circumstances are interchangeable, I think.
Yeah.
But that's interesting that you went on a retreat. I was in Colombia for 4 months almost, and I almost did it. I was like this close to doing it, an ayahuasca retreat, but I just started reading too much into it and started getting to like a little bit freaked out because like my parents are far from normal. So I was reading that if you are predisposed to like certain conditions, that you should probably not do it,
Yeah.
or that there was like a five or 10% chance it could like really go wrong if
Yeah.
your parents have like, you know, psychiatric problems. So that was like maybe not. But I wish I could do it, and I still might at some point. Um, but yeah, no, it's cool that you did that. Was it like a week long thing?
It was 12 days,
Oh
and
wow, okay,
we did I had done ayahuasca in Colombia about 2.5 or 3 years prior to that experience. So I'd had some experience, but I was very like during my first ayahuasca retreat, I was really reluctant to like be open to the experience. Like I took ayahuasca, but I didn't really open up. And a big part of it is allowing yourself to open up so that like the medicine actually takes hold and like does its
mm,
work on you. This particular retreat, I don't think I could have prevented the medicine from taking hold on me because it felt so strong. Like the physical
nice.
symptoms as well as the things that happened to me internally were like just impossible to avoid. And I had like huge breakthroughs this time. And we also did a combo, which is I don't know how to appropriately explain this, but they burn you on your arm and then they put the secretion from like a poison dart frog on you, and that like causes you to have like these crazy physical reactions, which I was like not exactly excited about prior. But you get nauseous, sometimes you vomit bile, like you get your throat swells up, becomes difficult to breathe, your head kind of grows like a size bigger, and then your heart starts beating really fast. And when they explain that to you before you do it, you're like, why the fuck would I do that?
Yeah,
But that was really cool. Did San Pedro, which the active ingredient in San Pedro is mescaline, which is the same as peyote. Um,
yeah.
so that's like very similar to what it feels like to trip like on psychedelic mushrooms. And I think like part of the euphoria associated with that trip also, like I would say is sort of similar to like MDMA. And then we did a couple of temazcals or sweat lodges, and then yeah, it was pretty intense, but it was very healing. Like it took me a while to like break in, but by the end, man, I just cried for like 3 days. And I think back to what we were talking about earlier, I think for the first time in my life I realized like how at least one method for like going in and digging out those emotions and letting them go. I don't think I had ever done that, and I can't remember the last time I cried
Mhm.
before that, to be honest. Like years. And
Yeah.
I cried like years of suppressed emotions out in 3 days. It felt amazing.
Hmm. Yeah, I should probably just do it. I mean, there's a risk, I guess, but I think it'd be worth it if I did it. Because I've been doing like 12-step work for like 7 years,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's plateaued. Like I feel like I've kind of gone as far as I can with that. And that's not a knock against that work. It's just like there's a certain level you reach, I think, where it's like I can't go any further without, I think that would kind of be an interesting. I had a lot of experiences with mushrooms as a teenager,
Yeah.
and I think that helped a lot with my, I was a really angry kid, so I feel like mushrooms really opened up my kind of spiritual capacity. And then when I did get sober, I was able to, like, I've been sober now for like 7 years, and I think I was able to do that because I had those spiritual experiences on mushrooms. And then when I had the spiritual experiences in sobriety, I was like, I think my brain was like remapped to have those, because I had like the white light, like I felt like I was on drugs. It was crazy. So I'd like to dive into that stuff more.
What do you think about, so like one of the things that's I appreciate you sharing a little bit about like your history as well, because one of the things that I think is like sort of fascinating is like some of my friends who had like battles with addiction in the past that are now sober,
Yeah.
gone on to like, become like addicted to like personal growth and spiritual development in a way.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah.
And
Totally.
they just like keep going on that path. So it's like the other one. Like, do you think that that's like something similar that's triggered to like what caused you to have addiction in the first place, or like what put you on the path? And I know not everybody's like that, but it seems to me that like,
Yeah.
I don't know, a good portion of my friends in this world like had trauma before of some kind, or like some kind of addiction or a struggle, and then they just went the other way.
Oh man. Well, have you read Be Obsessed or Be Average by Grant Cardone?
No, I've read Sell or Be Sold and a couple of others books, but not that one.
Okay. But you're like familiar with him, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
he, was like a meth addict until he was like 25, and then Be Obsessed or Be Average is like him talking about going to rehab when he was like 25, and then them telling him like, hey, you have this like condition, disease that you have to manage for the rest of your life. It's never going to go away. And then he was kind of like, fuck you, and then went into his business. And now the whole book is like him basically talking about how he changed his addiction from meth into like making money. And I don't know, like when I first read it, I was like, oh, this is a good book. Like it's motivating. But now that I'm like researching this stuff more, that book has stood out to me as like one of those things where I don't really know where I stand on it. But I feel like that is like, he is like the personification of, like I go back and forth with him more than anybody else. I feel like some months I'm like so into it, I'm like fired up. And then other months I'm like, is this healthy? Like, so for me, he's like this figure that, because he was like one of the first guys I ever found
Yeah.
in this kind of like world. So he's someone that I go back to a lot. But then when I watch his stuff, he's always just like, we got to make the money, we got to make the money. And like I've worked with those kind of guys before, like in real life, like IRL. And I don't know, man, they haven't been like the happiest, most fulfilled people I've ever met. That's for sure.
Hmm.
So I don't know, like, I don't know where that's a tough one, like being addicted to, success. And like, um, I think for me, a lot of my success is based on like fear. My biggest fear is like working at a job, like working in an office or
Yeah.
something. And so I think there's a, I don't know, it's like there's a healthy amount of going my own way. So it's like, I guess it's that balance of like trying to be motivated more by the opportunity of going my own way versus the fear of like having to go back to like a job.
Yeah.
And that's something I struggle with. Like even this morning, like looking outside, I get up, I got my coffee, I'm in this warm apartment. I just see like, I live downtown Vancouver, and I just see all these people in the rain, with their umbrella. And I'm just like, oh God, like the idea of going to an office at like 9 a.m. to me and staying there till 5, like I just can't do it. I haven't had a job since like 2015.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's about the same time for me too. I think like, well,
Yeah.
I started just like a little bit before you, I guess. Like I haven't officially had a job since I started my first like freelancing business at the very beginning of 2014, so around then.
Okay.
Um,
I had a job. Well, I had a job for 3 months actually in 2016. But other than that, I have not. And that job to me was like a reminder of like, oh my god, I could never. Even in like a really cool office, like they modeled it after Google. It's like a really big tech company locally here, and they had all the beer and ping pong tables and like big chairs and beanbag chairs, and like everybody's all like company culture. And I cringe it. I think that's my biggest like cringe is like corporate culture.
yeah,
I can't go on LinkedIn without like vomiting. And like Gary Vee, who I love, is always talking about like LinkedIn is like the next platform. And I can't get into it. I hate all the sayings, the slogans, a valued employee is da da da. And it's like, or like 53 tips to maximize your lunch hour. It's just, or new study reveals what shoes to wear to the office on your first day. Like I can't handle that stuff. Like like it's just, I
yeah.
don't know. It makes me cringe.
Oh, dude, yeah, I can relate to that, man. Like my transition into entrepreneurship was teaching abroad, like teaching English
Mm,
abroad in South Korea for like a year and a half before I started my business. And that's way
okay.
better than like a normal office. But even towards the end of that, it was like kind of rough. But the end of
Yeah.
my real corporate career in Chicago, I just remember going into the office and I literally like I had the same routine every morning. I would go get like a coconut milk latte with like this peanut butter bagel downstairs, and I would go
Yeah.
into the office and like be super fired up for like an hour.
Yeah.
Um, like that would like be like it like max, and then towards the end it was like I could give like 45 minutes worth of like any sort of effort towards the job, and then it was just like dreary and I would just sit there. It's also
Oh
interesting,
yeah.
like I've noticed with like caffeine, and I don't know if like you notice this as well, but like when you're working on uh when you're working on stuff that like fires you up, like I don't get the typical caffeine crash. Like caffeine, I can feel its impact like fire me up and then crash harder when I'm like working on something that like I don't enjoy. Like now, like occasionally I'll like crash when I don't feel like I'm in flow if I've had coffee or whatever in the afternoon. But like
Mm,
when I'm working on stuff that like I like, or I'm fired up about having a conversation with someone like you because it's like 5 p.m. my time,
yeah.
like I'm pretty energized because like I'm enjoying like what I'm putting my time into, and I think that's like
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And then like have you read the book The Power of When?
For the power of now.
Yeah, yeah. So The Power of When, there's four different chronotypes. So there's four different, you're either a lion, a bear, a wolf, or a dolphin.
Yeah.
And this has been fascinating because I have this Aura ring now where it like
Awesome.
tracks my sleep, like
Yeah.
minute by minute. It tracks my deep sleep, my REM sleep, and then it's an app that it's connected to, and it gives me a readout of like my resting heart rate variability, deep sleep, REM sleep lights. So I've found out that I'm actually a wolf, and I always thought I was a lion. So I was always trying to get up at 5 a.m. and like, crush it in the morning and get all this shit done. But that's not my body type. Like I don't function at all. And if I look back, like all those mornings I got up super early, I was like I was a mess. And I was always like, all these health gurus are like, you got to get up at like 4 a.m., like, or 5 a.m. That's when all the successful people get up. And then this book is like talking about how no, like your physical body is wired in like a certain way. And like even I think Jeff Bezos is also a wolf, and like, he gets in the office at like 10 a.m. Like there's lots of CEOs actually. Bill Gates is another one. He gets into the office at like 10 a.m. So this like ring has shattered a lot of like the health gurus shit from me, because all the stuff that I was following like didn't work for me.
Yeah.
So for me to get the best sleep, I go to bed at midnight. I sleep until 7 or 8. I work out at night. I eat late at night. Um, and that gives me the most deep sleep and the most REM sleep. Whereas if I go to bed at 9 or 10 p.m. and get up at 5, I like do not go into deep sleep at all. I'll get like 3 minutes of deep sleep versus like an hour of deep sleep if I go later. It's like really trippy. And I've been testing it now for like 2 months. So I've tried every different variation and combination of like different hours and different exercise routines. And like, that's what works for me is like between 11:45 and 12:30 at night is like when I have to go to bed. was really interesting.
The chronotypes, man.
Yeah, yeah.
A buddy of mine that I had on the podcast earlier, like 2 episodes ago, actually was talking about that, and
Okay,
he is a lion. But
nice.
it was cool. It was cool to have like some sort of like frame of reference, and I think things like the
Yeah,
aura are really cool because they make it really easy to just objectively track, and then
yeah,
like objectively track like real data, and then apply that to whatever the
yeah,
situation is.
yeah. It's funny in the book too. He's like, most people that read this book will want to be a certain chronotype.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, oh man, I really want to be the lion. Like, um, so yeah, and then the wolf, yeah, for me, it's like you stay up late and then your creativity comes at night. And that's always been the same for me. That's all I've always known that. Like I produce music, all my music that I make, I always make it at night. That's just when I'm in my zone, is from like after 9 p.m., like 9 until, 12:30 is like when I'm in most creative for sure.
Where are you putting the music stuff down right now, man? Do you have like a SoundCloud or anything? Because I see you putting up tracks all the time.
Yeah, I have a SoundCloud. That for me is another struggle, is like getting my music out there. I'm so attached to it personally, um, that I have a hard time like putting it out. I do have an EP coming out. It's in the pipeline. I was 6 months late on like giving it to them, so I'm not in it. I'm not like, hey guys, like what's going on? Like where is it? Because
Yeah.
they wanted it in December, and I just sent it last week. So I'm like, hey, sorry it's a bit late.
Yeah.
That's like me obsessing over like everything has to be perfect, and like, you know, so that's another like thing I have to work on, is like getting my stuff out there.
What else?
People.
Go
Sorry, go ahead.
go.
No, it's just like, oh, people aren't going to understand it, and like all that stuff.
Mm.
Like this last thing I made is like I was talking about before, is like more of like a Russian theme. Like I have all these old like synth sounds from like the former Soviet Union, and like weird communism music, like all cut up, and just like weird, like weird shit. So, but yeah, it's fun.
That's sick,
I've
dude.
been into yeah, I've been into that. I've been into music since I was like, like 6 years old, pretty much. So, that's another big escape that I'm spending probably 3 to 4 hours a day on that for the last like 8 years, pretty consistently.
Yeah, you seem pretty dialed in into all the stuff that you've like dug into, man. Like from
Yeah,
you've done. I mean, you've done a lot. I imagine you cleared like a lot of space, in your life, especially after like you stopped partying and stuff, and you've like clearly dedicated that energy to like a lot of different pursuits.
right.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
about what about like? I mean, what else are you up to right now aside from like like what are you doing? Like what are you doing for work?
So I started a website in 2017 called High Energy Trading.
Yeah,
It was actually like a Donald Trump joke in the beginning, because like he was always talking about like, oh, this like low energy jab or whatever. Like, so me and my buddies, it was always this like inside joke of like if someone was like low energy or high energy. So what I was like finding a name, that's like what I picked. So I'm still running that business, and that it's had its ups and downs. Like I've made a lot of mistakes. It's been my first successful business. Before that, I was freelancing and working with yoga studios. I worked at a yoga retreat in Thailand for 7 months.
yeah, I saw that.
So
Awesome.
yeah, I got to like live at the retreat for free. It's a $500 a day retreat that I lived at for free for 7 months. So like that was
Yeah,
amazing.
that's sick.
That would be like the up, and then the down is like, moving back in with my mom, because I have just a couple freelance clients and I'm like struggling to even buy food. So the freelance world, I think, is very up and down. And even the business that I'm doing now is also very up and down, but luckily the ups are very high. So they can, um, the down, so then it kind of like levels out the downturn
Yeah,
as well.
for
And
sure.
I would say right now I'm in a bit of a downturn, but I definitely need to like up my sales. It's my thing's all sales. And that for me is like the hardest thing to do is sales. But I gotta suck it up and do it more.
Just in terms
But
of like you just feel averse to doing it.
yeah, and it's like I don't know what to charge as well. It's like I don't know whether to go, have a couple clients and charge them, a lot and be really dedicated to them, or go wide and charge a lot less and have, that's always been a struggle too. cause I've been charging clients anywhere between, 15 and 25 grand a month.
Yeah.
Um, but the client retention hasn't been super high.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to demonstrate that value a lot of the time. But then I've also gone the other way where I've gone a lot cheaper and been like a slave to them. But then that also isn't good because then they don't really value it either. So I've found it really hard to find that like sweet spot where you're getting paid and you're getting enough money from the client where they value you, but like you're not also like undercutting yourself. It's a tough one. Like it is a tough one. But luckily in my industry, there's a lot of money floating around.
Yeah.
Like there's tons of money floating around. And I have a lot of self-limiting beliefs around money as well. And I don't realize like that 25 grand to them is not the 25 grand my mom had as a kid.
Yeah.
Like that's been a really weird thing to go through, is like these guys, I forget, like these guys have $100 million in their bank account.
Yeah.
Like, so, my mom made 50 grand a year. So that's been a really a big mind fuck, is like going and transitioning into that frame of like, these guys have money. Like you can go to them and ask for money.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough one though.
Yeah, dude. No, it was like I think I'm struggling with that a lot as well. Like still, and it's interesting, especially like I mean you've had a lot of experience and you've had some big wins in
Yeah.
entrepreneurship since I've known you, which is pretty cool. Like I've
Yeah.
definitely been like following your journey, and you and I've stayed in pretty good touch. But it's weird, yeah. I mean, I just sold my business for like more money than I've ever had in my life, like 4 months ago, and yeah, man, I just launched an info product, and I've never technically sold anything like that before. And I got someone to pay me $1,000 for the program that I'm launching. And that first payment that came in felt like the first dollar that I had ever made, because I had never. It still was mysterious to me to make money in that way. So it was like,
Right.
and it still feels weird, but I'm excited. I mean, I have buddies that kill in the info product space, and I've just been ruminating on that a little bit more lately in terms of like some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier, just like digging into and also sitting with that emotion and like analyzing a little bit. Because I think like I don't know about you, but for me, like when I have those self-limiting beliefs or whatever, like it's almost like I don't sit with them long enough to like dissect them and like have like make them go away. You know what I mean? Like those beliefs, like a lot of times I feel like they stay because we run away from them.
Right. Oh yeah, no, that's huge. Or I like to call it like proactive procrastination,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, I'm gonna go read like 10 books. This is what I do, is like something will come up, and instead of like dealing with it or looking at it, it's like, okay, I got to read 10 books on the topic, and after I read those 10 books on the topic, then I'll actually understand it.
Yeah.
Instead of like, I know I have the self-awareness to do it. It's just like, that's a nice like way to procrastinate, is just like over research it, over analyze it. But yeah, the info product space is interesting. I've thought about going that route. It's more freedom for sure. And I feel like the amount of people I've met in my business, I could definitely like the amount of knowledge I have in collaboration with the people I've met, working with, I could create something that is has never been put in the market before. And again, there's tons of money in the industry that I'm in. So I've definitely thought about that.
Yeah, it could be a cool thing to explore, man. Like I'm really excited about it as well. It's another thing too, because like, one thing's making money from it, but the other thing is like, the imposter syndrome. But like,
Right. Oh, I have that too.
but it's weird because I mean, I'm pretty convinced that it never stops, because now I'm literally, I've done something that like less than point. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is of people that have successfully like had an exit from a business is, and like the
Right.
world, but like I'm sure it's very small. And like,
Yeah.
regardless of how much you sold your business for, and like I was, comfortable with what I sold mine for, but I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm in this new, this new percentage of people, and I still, it's like every time that also happens to me, it's like I network with like people that are better than me all the time. So my surroundings, my direct
Oh, exactly.
network
Yeah.
is like, I'm talking to people that do way better than I have or that I do right now. So I'm like in this warped echo chamber that like is a bit of a mind fuck for me, which I think sometimes is negative because it causes me to feel a little less worthy than I am when it comes
Yeah.
to stuff like this.
You just assume like everybody's just crushing it. Like you go outside and you just like everybody you see is like, fuck, they must have, I do that too all the time.
Yeah.
It's like you underestimate yourself and you overestimate society. Like I have a huge, um, when I went to Thailand actually, and that's where I learned all this stuff was in Thailand. That's why I met Zach, who
Oh, nice.
used to work for you.
Yeah. Cool.
There's another guy there that really like, like red pilled me. And the hardest pill for me to swallow was how, maybe dumb's not the right word, but like how asleep society, like most people in society are. Because I have this thing where I just assume everybody's smarter than me. Everybody's out there killing it and crushing it. And I haven't figured it out yet, and that's been it. And so, yeah, the imposter syndrome is big for me too. Like it's hard for me to realize like, hey, I built this business out of like my mom's house. I was like on the floor of my mom's house on an air mattress, like inhaling dog fur every morning. And like a year later, I've done like over 600 grand in revenue.
Yeah.
And like basically from nothing. I didn't even have the $7 or the $14 to buy the proper domain name. I had to buy like the shitty like .ltd domain name.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time giving myself like credit for doing that because there's all these other guys out there who have been doing this for 10 years and they're doing, 10 times that. And I'm like, well, fuck, like I haven't gotten to that point yet. So yeah, I mean, I can relate to the imposter thing too. It's tough. It's tough to get over, man. It's a tough one.
Yeah, man. A little bit of self-love, but also like my buddy put me through this exercise. We were having a phone call just like this. And we were talking about something like quite similar. And he literally extracted some of my self-limiting beliefs and like discarded them, I think, forever.
Oh, wow.
I think if you really just address that and you talk, because like if you just go through the dialogue like we just had and then you like really look at the numbers of like the people that are killing it versus the ones that are not, and you realize like how small of a percentage it is to be you doing what you're doing. I mean, you feel a lot better with yourself, one, with like where you're at, and there's some self-acceptance associated with that, even though part of you maybe still has the desire to be where like those other people are. But more importantly is like at least 99% of the shit that you've said to yourself that comes from comparing yourself with like this percentage over here is not true with like the rest of the world. Like those, to just
Right.
realize that those things are not true, and like literally just like go through and ask yourself questions and then prove that they're not true. Like, yeah, it was a big release for me. So like that, but it's hard. I mean, it's super hard to like keep that frame of reference for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. That's definitely a topic I'd like to get into more, but I don't want to do the same thing I normally do, where I just like read a bunch of books and then like don't really deal with it. So that's something I need to be more active on doing. Cause yeah, like in Thailand, my buddy, like he was selling like cat toys online, like drop shipping cat toys. And I'm like, no, there's no way that's going to work. Like that's stupid. Like who's going to buy like a cat toy? And this is like the fidget spinner craze too. And everybody's like selling fidget spinners. I'm like, no, that's stupid. Let's sell this. And like everything I tried like didn't work. And then my buddy starts doing like 70 grand a month, like selling cat toys. And I was just like, oh, so that was a big eye opener too. It's like, it's not up to me at the end of the day. It's like society. A lot of it's just like not up to me and it's in my head and it's like, it's not real. And I'm like, oh, there's no way, like who would buy a cat toy like from a Facebook ad? Like no one's going to do that. And he's like, yeah, they will. And he's showing me a Shopify store. I'm like, fuck, like they're buying these like dumb toys, and he's like, yeah, people buy cat toys. Just like, oh my God.
What had stopped you from like, what do you think it was that stopped you from being like, yeah, that won't work? Because I mean, for me, a lot of it, especially with my buddies who killed it in drop shipping, I'm like, and I still feel like I tell myself this narrative. I'm like, oh man, I just don't know if I don't know if I'm like into that enough, like to like stick,
Right.
you know?
like, I guess for me, it's almost like I feel like I'm like selling out,
Yeah.
like just selling these like corny, fucking cheap plastic things from China. Um, but I don't know. I'm sure there's something like deeper to that. That's like I don't know. But I feel like I missed the drop shipping boat. But I
Yeah.
started hanging out with this girl recently, actually, and that's what she does. And I'm like, people are still doing that, hey? And
Drop
she's like,
shipping.
yeah, like we're doing well. She's got a really niche store and has a big following on Instagram. And I'm like, holy shit, I had forgotten that was like still a thing.
Yeah.
That's like my ego, I guess, of like, oh, Facebook changed the algo in 2017,
You're
but no, it's still a thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. I think also like within like certain niches that seem to be like phases, there's still people that like
Right.
kill it on eBay, man. Like it's like
Yeah.
these trends come and go, but like there's the best people in there are still kicking.
Yeah. But I'd say like my business, the big advantages of my business is like 100% margins. I'm creating content on my own site, and every client that I get is I own the platform. So
Yes.
every client that I get, I'm building my business through that client. So I'm not building their Instagram following. I'm building my traffic through through content that I'm writing about them. So that's like the beauty of that business model of like owning the platform is yeah, and it's not like any of them have a problem with it. That's just like how the business is structured. So
Yeah.
when I meet people who aren't like entrepreneurs, like you might face this too, I find it lonely because no one understands. Like my family, girls that I go out with, my friends even, they're like, well, what do you do? And I try to explain it to them. It's like I create content on my site for companies that are on the stock exchange, and they pay me to write positive things about them, and then I distribute that information on platforms. And to them, they're like, well, like what? Like I don't know. I can't really explain it properly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you face that too, where people ask you what you do and you try to explain it and they're like, what?
Oh yeah, it's tough,
I
dude.
don't, I don't know.
Like
Yeah.
now, like almost all my like direct friends are entrepreneurs, so most of
Right.
my world is like easy to talk to about that. So I don't like
Right.
come across that all the time, but when I go home for sure, it used to bother me way more than it does now. I used to actually get offended, and that was another thing too. Is like, why would I get
Mm,
offended by that? Because it
yeah.
was another thing. It was like there was some sort of ego thing going on. Because if someone doesn't know what I do and I'm still making money from it, then like why does it matter like what they think about it? You know what I mean? So a lot
Right.
of times before when people like couldn't understand what I did, it made me question what I was doing. So I was like, what am I?
Yeah. 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 No, totally. I
Yeah.
can relate to that too. Yeah. I was out with my sister last night over dinner and she's like asking me, how it works. And I'm trying to explain it to her. And like, she doesn't understand, online stuff. And at the end of it, I'm like, oh, like, what am I doing? But then it's like, no, that's stupid. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think like Gary Vee is like seen as like the messiah. And I don't really like, I do like Gary Vee a lot. He's not like the entire solution, but he talks about that a lot too, of how like, one of the downsides to entrepreneurship is like, it can be lonely. Like it can be people, the masses aren't really going to understand. But then it's the same time, it's like, I don't understand the masses either.
Yeah.
Like I hung out with someone recently and like her whole thing is like her CV, her resume, that's like every decision is predicated on building the resume. And to me, like that, I don't understand that. So like when people explain to me like, oh, well, I took that, I'm going to work at this job for like not very long, 5 years to build up the resume. And for me, I'm like 5 years, like the amount of stuff you could build in 5 years, like that seems like a lifetime to me. I mean, like it took me 7 months to become profitable.
Yeah.
Um, like that might be a bit rare, but in 5 years, if you dedicated yourself as much to the job that in your own business and just lived like humbly, like the amount of stuff you could do in 5 years is just, or people who spend hundreds of thousands on school. That's another thing that's like insane to me. Unless you're becoming like an engineer, like a doctor, but people who just go and they're spending all this money on like stuff like, courses and sociology. And I'm like, you could take that money, that 50 grand or whatever, and like you could travel the world for like, I could travel the. I went to Asia for a year with 10 grand. I spent 10 grand in a year, including flights. So
Damn.
that's 10 grand Canadian. That's 6 grand US, 6.5 grand US
Yeah.
in like 12 months. Like the amount of stuff you can do with, yeah, that blows my mind too. That's the backup. That's the backup plan. I love having that. Is like if everything in my business melts, if everything just goes to shit, the stock market crashes, which it might, and I become like destitute. I know that I can go to like Southeast Asia and just like get a job at some like retreat or whatever, and go there with like $3,000 and still be okay. Like I that's like the backup plan. That's like the backup plan for me is not going to get a job. Like it's not, if shit hits the fan, it's not going to a web developer agency and getting a job. It's like going to Vietnam or Thailand or something and like figuring it out again.
Yeah.
That's just how I'm wired, I think, too.
Yeah, I don't think it was how I was wired for a while. I think like I think I always dreamed of being wired like that, but like I had a tendency to like run back to like the job idea thing. But I was in and out
Yeah.
of so many different jobs that like I think at the end of the day, like you realize whether or not like that like like what what thread sort of like resonates with you. Because I mean, it just never worked out for me, and like it's easy to see
Mhm.
why. You know what I mean? And it was like easy to see that I just got like literally that environment was like poison. Like I couldn't survive. Like I couldn't imagine myself going into the same place every day because like I felt physically ill, man. Like I
Oh
started.
man, me too. Yeah, yeah.
I got like this weird rash and shit. I got these weird like pains in my back. Like it was just like it's physical. Like it's like okay,
Yeah.
cool. Like I may have died if I like kept doing that. You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, me too, man. Like even that job I had for 3 months, it's like say I have like 9 cups of coffee, and it'd be like 1 p.m. and I'd be like so wired, but also like crashing, and I'd have like 27 tabs open on the thing, and I'd just be like, like what am I doing? And then someone looking over your shoulder, like, hey, why are you doing that? You got to go back and move that around, and like just like I can't. I don't know. I just don't. I don't have that in me to just tough it out and do it. I don't
Dude,
know.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Well, what comes next for you, man? What are you looking forward to for the rest of the year?
So I want to start my own publicly traded company. That's the next phase.
Hell yeah.
So I've been promoting and working with clients now for the last 2 years. I partnered with a venture capital firm last year. So I worked with them for like 9 or 10 months. And so I've seen the inner workings of like how a VC firm works and like what kind of companies they invest in and what it takes to get a kind of investment like that. So that's been a really valuable experience. So um, because I've been in the cannabis industry now for like 2 years, the next big thing is psychedelics.
Yeah.
So even Peter Thiel is backing a like $800 million IPO for mushrooms like in November. And I mean, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Financial Post, like all these Bloomberg are all talking about psychedelics. And I'm actually going to a conference that my buddy's friend is running next weekend. It's an investor conference, and Dennis McKenna is the keynote speaker.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's like an investor, old guys in suits, and like he's the keynote speaker, and Ben Greenfield, which is hilarious too, because I like Ben
Oh, that's
Greenfield.
cool.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go the consumer package goods route, where I'm gonna be selling reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps, and potentially even CBD as well, and with the hopes of getting acquired. So I watched the cannabis industry and what happened in the cannabis industry. So Canada legalized cannabis last year, October 2018. So what happened is companies started raising money back in 2013, 2014, but it was all based around like medical.
Yeah.
So all these companies raised a bunch of money. They had medical branding, pharma branding. They had canna, pharma, whatever. Like it was very medical, very sciencey. But then once we got closer to legalization, those companies that raised all that money started buying the lifestyle brands. So a buddy of mine, not a buddy, but a guy I know, he had a company called Doja, and it got bought by Canopy for $600 million. And
Okay.
it was like a lifestyle cannabis brand. And there's been a bunch of those too. So I think the exact same thing is going to happen with psychedelics is a bunch of people are going to raise a bunch of cash. Like it's already happening right now. It's going to be all really research-based and medical-based, but they're not going to have good brands. And then they're going to start buying the properly branded. So I want to be positioned for that buyout when it happens. And it's going to be a couple of years, but that's what I want to position myself for. It's already actually starting to happen. Like last night at midnight, I looked and one of the weed companies actually bought a mushroom company, or they bought 30% of a mushroom company. And I was like, that could also happen as well, where now these big weed companies, they're going to start investing into psychedelics.
Yeah.
So that's where I really see it going. So I want to be early on that, because cannabis, I was a bit late. I was 2017, I got into it, and 2014 is when it started.
Yeah.
And I think with my own experience with mushrooms, like I really do that helps a lot. So I'm trying to kind of build my team right now, of people, advisors and people to work with, because I think that's going to be massive. So that's my next big project. And I've already started. I've got the site almost finished. I'm doing all the branding, all the design work, all the messaging, all that stuff. So creating all the content, which is another mistake the cannabis industry never, like the amount of mistake, because basically the whole cannabis industry was like old mining guys that were doing cobalt, just like overnight switch to cannabis.
Yeah.
And then they would hire some like 16-year-old girl to do their social media. They wouldn't create any content. They would blow 250 grand on like native ad campaigns that would like had no returns, or would only have returns as far as the campaign was on. Then once the campaign was turned off, the stock would plummet. So all that same shit is going to happen. So I feel like if I can bring the content angle of it as well with the branding, the bio I think will be massive.
Yo, give me 1 second and then we'll continue that thought.
Sure. I'll pretend to drink this empty cup of coffee here. Cold coffee. Or maybe this will be edited out. I don't know. We'll be editing the podcast. Need some like music, like when you call someone and you get put on hold. Just rambling. Checking the Instagram. I hate Instagram. I hate bite-sized content. I scroll for like 30 seconds and then I get bored, because I like the long form. I can't handle I'm talking about Instagram. I'm trying to do like filler while you were gone. Just like, I hate Instagram. Like I deleted Instagram for 18 months and just recently got it back. And I absolutely hate it.
Why do you hate it?
I hate bite-sized content. I can't stand like, oh, photo, 3 sentences, photo. Like it's so like ADD for me. Like I need the long form. I need to like sit down. I need the 10-hour audiobook or like the 2-hour podcast. I don't know how people spend a bunch of time on social media. I just can't, like I use it to communicate, I guess, and like post stuff, but I don't really consume a lot of content. Like I try to create content, but not consume. I think Gary Vee talks about that too, is like be a creator, not a consumer.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people on social media who never post anything, never create anything, but they'll be like the first ones to always watch like my Instagram stories or whatever.
Yeah. It's funny because like you want them to be consuming your shit, but like you don't be the one that's just like liking and everything else and not every.
I don't know if I've ever watched an Instagram story before. Like if I ever do, it's like accident. I'm like, oh no, like get out. Like I don't know. It seems like weird to me, because I had Instagram before the story thing happened.
Yeah.
So back in the day. But now I try to put out like 2 or 3 stories a day, but I don't watch other people's stories.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's selfish, but
I think it's I don't know what the right word is, man, but like I think it's good. I mean, I think it's good like to have I think it's proactive, man. It's like proactive control of your time. And then what you do consume, you're very intentional about.
Yeah.
Because otherwise like you're inevitably like just getting into reactivity by just pressing and like seeing what comes across your screen. It's just like I feel
Yeah.
gross whenever like I feel myself going into that. I've been in like sometimes I'll get into like a social media hole and be like, what the fuck?
Oh yeah. I do that on Reddit, man. I spend a lot of time on Reddit. Like that's the only platform that I really spend like time on. Like I'll check Instagram and I'll check Facebook, but when I go on Reddit, I go like deep into Reddit. So I catch myself too, just like, what am I doing? Like, why am I reading the 900th comment on this? Like,
It's funny. My girlfriend is a Redditor as well.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
she
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
Which is not I've never actually like understood that platform, but I get it, especially with a mind like yours, man. Like you're very like every stone needs to be like unturned, it seems like, and it seems like the content that you do consume, like you finish it all, which is cool.
yeah, yeah. Dude, I'm trying to read. Have you heard the Gulag Archipelago? Have you heard of that book?
No.
It's one of the books Jordan Peterson is all like every video he's like, you need to read the Gulag Archipelago. It's gonna teach you like he like rails on that book and I think it's a 77-hour audiobook
Damn.
and I'm 12 hours into it
Oh my
and
god.
I'm like it's something that I'm just like cracking away at slowly. But it's so fascinating. It's the book that led to the end of the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Like
Well,
it's the inside story on all the prison camps basically. And this guy had inside the camp who wrote it had to memorize the whole thing because he couldn't write it down. If he got caught writing it, he would get like stolen and he would get the death penalty. So he had to keep it all in his head. And then he had to, I don't know how he ended up getting it out, but he had to give each chapter to a different person to like export it from the Soviet Union. And then someone in like Finland, I think, had to compile it all together and then like publish it. And that was the first look into what was going on inside the Soviet Union. And that's basically when the whole like nation collapsed, was from that information. It's really crazy. But at the end of it, the reason Jordan Peterson always is like railing on people to read it is I haven't gotten to this part yet, but so basically the author, he was in a Nazi camp. Like he was a Russian soldier in Prussia. He got captured, put in a Nazi camp, and any Russian who was put in a Nazi camp fighting for Russia, once they returned to Russia, had to go to a slave camp themselves because they were seen as a foreign whatever. So even fighting for Russia, they had to go to. So he went from a Nazi camp to a Russian camp,
yeah.
and it's like him, a lot of it is like him reflecting on, he's even questioning like, what did I must have done something to like deserve. He's like not blaming himself, but he's like looking inwards on what he contributed to like his situation. So it's like Man's Search for Meaning, like on steroids. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's the book that I was thinking about as well.
Yeah,
Talking about that,
yeah, great book. Yeah,
which is a
I've
lot,
read that.
a lot more bite-sized.
Yeah, I've read that book probably 3 or 4 times now. Yeah, it's a really interesting book for sure. I love the angle of using that as like the setting, like how he uses Auschwitz as like the setting, but it's not necessarily like about Auschwitz. Like I wish more books were like that, like using a setting to have like a bigger message, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's one of my favorite books, I think for sure is Men's Search for Meaning. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, dude. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to re-up my reading list. I've taken a bunch of notes throughout our
Nice.
call.
What are you reading these days?
Oh, dude, what am I reading, man? Off the top of my head, that's so. I have you ever heard of Alain de Botton?
No, I don't
Um,
think so.
he has so he actually I heard of him on one of Tim Ferriss' like first podcasts.
Hmm.
He has this thing called the School of Life, which is like modern day philosophy on YouTube. It's a YouTube channel, and then he has like different publications and stuff that he has released. But he has a book out. One of my favorite books is called "How Proust Can Change Your Life," and Proust
Okay.
is Marcel Proust is a French author. he wrote the longest book ever written. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the longest book ever written. It's like uh, that's why he's famous. But he analyzes this guy's life from like a philosophical perspective, and it's pretty incredible. It's one of my favorite books. But he's writes another book called The Course of Love, which is kind of like a novel with like little philosophical tidbits about modern romance and relationships, and like different types of interactions and sort of like unsaid things, and a lot of like uh, probably some like sexual psychology that's like a bit Freudian in there as well, which is kind of cool. So that's one thing that I'm reading right now. I've usually got more than one thing going on. I'm reading another book called Key Person of Influence, which is kind of helping me develop some of the info product stuff, like a framework on like how to dial in some of that. And then The Way of the Superior Man. I've read that before, but I'm reading that by David Dida again.
Yeah, it's a good one to go into. Yeah, I've read that a few times too. It's a good one.
Yeah, so they're pretty legit. And then I've been listening to some Jordan Peterson podcasts recently.
Okay.
So
okay, nice.
Yeah, so I'm halfway through one right now, man. He's awesome.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I saw him live last year. I think it was him and Sam Harris.
Oh, dope.
Yeah. It's interesting.
What a dude.
Yeah, he's well, I'm in Canada, so he's like a very controversial figure.
Yeah.
You can't really talk about him like in public. I feel like you know he got tied in with a lot of like, and I don't see him as like the be all and end all, but I do like enjoy listening to a lot of his stuff.
Yeah.
But it's funny how he got like lumped in with a lot of like the, like, did you see the Shane Gillis thing like yesterday?
Shane Gillis?
Yeah. So SNL hired this guy, this comedian, Shane Gillis, and some blogger dug up some racist joke he made on a podcast like 2 years ago, and SNL fired him like 12 hours after hiring him. And it's like all over social media and people are like at war, and it's like, it's crazy, man. Like that whole call out culture thing, like I don't know. It's so bizarre to me.
It's so weird.
But
I think it's
cool
in a way people that are facing that right now, to be honest.
Yeah. But like in a way, like I noticed that was a thing, and I almost like built a lot of my business like on that framework. So a lot of what I do is calling out fraud. Like, so CEOs that are like basically like scamming investors. A lot of my content is like based on that model because I saw how profitable it would be, because that's how people are online.
Yeah.
So everybody else in my industry is like really safe. They're creating this like content that's really just kind of like milquetoast and really kind of just like vanilla. And so I was like, wait, but the conversations online are so like rabid and people are so angry. How do I tap into that? And it's like, okay, well, a lot of these CEOs are like con artists and like scam guys. And I got one guy fired from a $1.2 billion company that he started himself. I got him fired from that out of stuff I dug up from his previous businesses. And then I've called out other guys as well. And one guy's in court right now, and I called him out a couple of years ago, and everybody was like, "You're crazy! Like, he's, I invested all this money," and I'm like, "No, it's gonna blow up." And they ended up liquidating to a crypto company in Germany, and the stock got dissolved. And now I'm kind of like, well, like I told you, so yeah, I've built a lot of my business around like that mindset that people have when they're online. And again, it's one of those things that I don't do. Like, it's like Instagram. It's like, I don't consume content, but I understand like the landscape right now.
Yeah.
And I understand that creating that clickbait, like digging into people, like that's really what gets traction, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it's the reality.
Dude, it is. Yeah. Taylor Gavinchuk, you're a well-rounded individual, man.
Oh, thanks.
I really enjoyed having you on, bro.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure.
We're going to have to bring you back when we've got some mushroom things to talk about here in the next year and a half or so. Hopefully we'll talk to you before then. But thank you so much for coming on, man. Like, I'm going to
for sure
dig into a lot of these resources that you mentioned. You talked about at least 3 books that I hadn't heard of that I've got written down. So I'm excited about that. Excited to find my chronotype officially and see if that changes my life at all. And, yeah, man, move on with some of the things.
Cool, man. All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Good chat.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right, man.